Flow 360 Talk Radio for Women and the book tour. This is Dawn Abbott, and I'm here to share my show and my book, both titled Your Life is Not a To-Do List: Tools for a More Entrepreneurial Journey. In this book, I share my life full of messes and successes and winnings and learnings, and what has become the lessons and the mantras and the exercises I use to walk in the light of gratitude and have a more joyful life than I've had in previous years. So it is my hope that while I share this story in this episode with you, that all future episodes are just sharing some of the lessons and the tools I use to make sure that those lessons stick, right? That I don't have to keep learning them. But I will also admit that life is full of relearning, and that I am certainly not a sage when I share this story and these lessons with you, but what I hope to be is a Sherpa. I have been an entrepreneur for 32 years. I've also been a daughter and a sister and a wife and a mother and a friend and the boss lady. And I'm hoping that through all of these roles and the lessons that I've learned, I can be a Sherpa. I can lead you on a trek that I've been on for a while. But each new time I hike this trek or I learn something new, I get a new lesson. And so I'm walking alongside you and trying to keep these lessons intact and trying to make sure that I remember them. But we all write the book that we're meant to read. And so Your Life is Not a To-Do List was a #1 new release on Amazon. And I'm thrilled that I can share it with you. So I will start this episode with sharing sort of the basic story of my life, and hope that that has some connection for you, because I think when we share our stories, we realize we're not alone. And we often think that we're the only ones going through these hard things. And so I'm hoping this story connects for you. And then each episode from here on out, we'll just start in diving in the lessons and some of the ways that I live more joyfully. So I'll start by telling you that the way I came into this life was not ideal, and it was not planned. My parents were in high school. My mom was 17 and a junior, and my dad was 18 and a senior in high school. And their families were not excited about the news, nor were they. They were scared, and they had been urged to not have me. And I'm thankful that they chose otherwise, or I wouldn't be here. And I'm glad to be here. So they did the best they could. My dad went to chef school. My mom got her high school diploma through a correspondence class. And I was born in Huntington Beach, California, and my dad did not want me to grow up in LA. And so we set off on a camping trip of 3 months when I was 3.5 years old. And we camped for 3 months. They had sold everything they had, and they were moving somewhere in the mountains, and ended up stopping in Aspen, Colorado. And my dad was sort of a rock star because he was a chef and he wasn't a ski bum. And so he had lots of job offers. And so that's where we landed and where we spent my first 10 years, which was pretty good. I mean, they were young and inexperienced parents, but they did their best, and they were happy and until they weren't. And then things started to fray, and they were young 20-somethings, and all their friends were partying in Aspen, and it was a crazy time in the early 70s. And they ended up divorcing and also moving towards a life of addiction and instability. And so from that time, from the time I was 10 years old, I went to 13 different schools and never really felt secure. Again, there was marriages and people in and out of my life and different homes. And so I never really felt stable. And as the first child, I sort of came to this belief that I had to keep the peace and I had to please people and avoid displeasing people in order to be okay. And so that was one of the first things that I went into my adult life with, this feeling of that I was only worth what I produced and what I accomplished. And so I met the man of my teenage dreams when I was 18 years old. And we married when I was 21 and had a baby shortly after. And in the year 1991, we got married, bought a house, had a baby, and started a business all in that year. So big moment, or big year in my life. And we did the best we could, and we were driven. And when we started this business, it was sort of a side gig to our regular jobs. And within 5 years, it grew to the point where we realized with 2 children and jobs, we needed to make a decision and jumped wholeheartedly into this business and took that risk. And we're young and dumb and uneducated and didn't have MBAs. And so we made all the mistakes you could make in business. And what we didn't know how to do was work smarter. And so we worked harder. And so we would sacrifice so much of life to our business and just run that treadmill and work 30+ hour shifts. And I'm not kidding. We really worked 38 hours was my longest shift at one point, doing really hard things. And until there was a couple of catalysts for change in that. And the first came when I thought, I can't do this anymore. I remember working this terribly long shift in which we loaded trucks, we went and delivered stuff to high schools all day long. And then we did after proms. See, this business is Fun Productions. It's an amusement rental company. And so we deliver large games and equipment, rock walls, bull rides, casino nights, things like that to colleges, high schools, and corporate special events. So during this time when we didn't know how to do things smart, we had this after prom season. And so we worked all day long Saturday, and then Saturday night overnight we worked at an after prom, manning the event, and then Sunday morning picked up things all day long, and then went and did another event Sunday night. And so that's how the 38-hour shift happened. And at the end of that, I remember just on my bathroom floor crying. I was filthy and exhausted and everything hurt. And I knew I had to get up the next day and get my kids to school and do all the billing and get proposals out to new clients and all of those things. And I thought, you know what, I'm quitting. I'm going to tell my husband that I quit and I'm just going to go get a job. And then my next thought was, I can't. He will suck me back in. I will have a full-time job and it will be just this one weekend. Just help me with this one thing. Get me caught up on this. And I knew I couldn't get out. And so I thought, well, I could pack up my boys and move far away and destroy my family. And I certainly wasn't ready to throw up that white flag. And so I said, I got to figure it out. There's ways that businesses succeed, and there's these others that limp along forever until they burn out and can't take it anymore. And I'm going to be the first. So I read everything I could read. I went to mastermind groups. I went to webinars and startup conferences, and I put some procedures and policies and processes into place, and things did get better, and we did have some breathing room, and we did have a little bit more life balance. But what didn't change is my mindset. I still stayed in my business from a place of control, fear, and ego. And if you're honest, some of you entrepreneurs have been there and are there now, right? Where it's really scary to let go of control because everything's going to fall apart and they can't do it without you. And you should be part of every decision that gets made. And it also feeds your ego to be that needed, right? To be that in control. And that's where I sat. And so while I could go on vacations, oftentimes I would be on the phone helping them make decisions that, they were told they couldn't make on their own, the team, or not take a vacation, right? And then the next major catalyst for change happened in 2013. So at this point, we now had 3 businesses because that's what visionary entrepreneurs do. They see shiny things and think of, ways that they could create more revenue. And so they start other businesses. So that is what we did. So we had 3 businesses and our sons were 18 and 21 years old. So one was in his 3rd year in college and one was a senior in high school. And so we were starting to think about our future and empty nesting and what the next phase was going to be like, and maybe reconnect as a married couple and not just business partners and co-parents. And so we were thinking about selling the largest business, Fun Productions, and keeping the other 2, and maybe each of us would run one so we wouldn't be together 24 hours a day working and living together. And then I found out I was pregnant. Yep, you heard that right. I was at the finish line of the marathon of raising kids. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved raising my children, but it's not easy. And when you're sort of at the precipice of them being adults, you think, oh, wow, what's next for me? All the things that I can do. And you don't think about, oh, let's just start the marathon over as you cross the finish line, right? And that's what we were doing. And so at some point during that pregnancy, I stopped crying and being afraid and being angry about the fact that this is what was happening. But instead, I got this overwhelming sense of this was for the greater good. Like this child was going to be the one to lead us into world peace or cure cancer. And, myself and the Virgin Mary would be sacrificing for the greater good of humanity. And I seriously had a spiritual moment in feeling that God told me that this child was not about me and that this was for something bigger. So she was born. Emerson Grace Abbott was born on May 19th, 2013. And 3 months later, as we were going to have both boys going off to college and we were going to have a full-time nanny, we thought, ooh, financially, life is going to be a little tougher. So what we thought would be a tough financial year with 2 kids in college and a full-time nanny, we went on vacation to Lake Powell. And in a tragic boating accident, we lost my husband. So what was supposed to be a time in my life of an empty nest and looking towards a future of reconnecting with my spouse, instead was a widow with a newborn baby, 2 young men who were going off to college and had just lost their father, and 3 businesses without a partner in any of those things. So during the fog of grief, I didn't care what was going on at the business. And I had this team of people who were at work dealing with their own fear, uncertainty, and doubt of what was next, and that her husband and our owner and founder is gone. Are we going to survive? What's going to happen? Should I start looking for a new job? They all could have just said, oh, well, not my problem, right? But instead, I learned how powerful the relationships and the culture is in your company, because that team picked up the ball and they ran with it, and they ran the company without a hitch. And so when I was able to sort of go back to work and try to function, what I realized was that I could actually delegate, and I could elevate these people, and I could let go of the vine. And so I ended up taking what I thought would be like a full-time job in self-discovery, or what became a full-time job of self-discovery. I didn't think that that's what it was going to be. I just decided to be intentional about my life. And since I had just rolled with it for so long and just, went along with whatever we were doing, I decided, okay, if it's not going to look like it was supposed to look, if this life that I expected to be linear was not, because it just had this giant shakeup, then I was going to decide what it was going to look like in the future. So I really needed to discover who I was and understand my strengths and my weaknesses and what drove me and what was I passionate about and what was my purpose. And so what I realized is, while I no longer had a lot of passion for the special events themselves and the event industry and that creative focus, that was really Tim, my husband, that was really his love. He loved special events. What I loved is the business and running the business and understanding the systems and what made things work. And I loved the creating the culture and building those relationships. And I also learned that I probably was ready for a change in business. I wasn't any longer serving my business. There was some burnout there. It had been 25 years at this point almost. And so I was thinking about selling. And at that time, my oldest son has finished school, Josh, and he came to me and said that he would be interested in potentially buying the business. And so I had just read the book Traction, which is sort of the manual for EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I knew that that was the solution. I knew that if this second generation business was going to be successful, that the vision for the future had to be his and not mine, and that the systems and processes and procedures and the cadence and the rhythms needed to be his. And most importantly, that the cohesive, healthy team needed to be his team and not mine if he was going to be successful in this endeavor and this transition. And so we implemented EOS, and from 2017 to 2019, we had a 30% revenue increase and a 300% net profit increase, and built a team of people who were totally aligned and who loved what they were doing. And we had a ton of fun together. And the other sort of gift of this trauma, besides the forced letting go and the learning about myself, was the fact that I was put into the owner's box in the business, that I no longer had day-to-day tasks. And so I decided that after knowing truly who I was and knowing what I knew about businesses and the pitfalls and the headaches and hassles and also the ways to be successful, and knowing what I knew about EOS and its success, I became a professional EOS implementer. And that's what I do today, is walk alongside and hold the hands of and I'm so privileged to be able to be on the sidelines of watching entrepreneurial companies strive and grow and help them do so efficiently and effectively. And so that's where we're at. My son is running the business. And the other beautiful thing about my journey is that I got to look back on my marriage and see all the times where I sat venting about what was wrong, what he didn't do, his shoes in the hallway, what was wrong with my business, all the things that weren't working in my life. And I sort of had a moment to look back at all that time spent in that negative place of wishing it was different than it was. And after the days after losing Tim, the days, the weeks, the months after losing him, I didn't remember any of those things that bothered me. All I missed were the things that I missed. The only thing that I could focus on was the things that I no longer had because he was gone, right? What I wouldn't give to see those shoes in the hallway. And so I made a vow at that moment to truly live a life of walking in gratitude. And don't get me wrong, I falter. There's lots of times where I'm like, I wish it was different. So don't think I'm a guru or a perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But when I get in those moments, I remember, okay, let's look at the good, right? And what I get to do now is choose to just look at all the things I would miss if they were gone. And I have also learned to feel my feelings. And I have learned to look back on my marriage and see my part in what was wrong and make a lot of changes. And then what happened is, in sort of a dating experiment, it was with my sisters, one of which was divorced and had 2 children, young elementary age children, and my youngest sister, who was never married. They were sort of playing the dating game, right? The phone apps, and they were laying on my floor laughing, and I came over and asked what was going on, what was on their phone, and they were like, "Oh, this isn't for you," and shrugged me off. And I was like, "Wait, I want to see." And so ended up looking at, some dating apps or whatever. And we had this conversation and this big laugh at that moment on my living room floor about what if we wrote a book. That would be hilarious. That the 3 of us, coming from such totally different perspectives, right? Me as someone who had been with the same person since I was 18, so never dated in my adult life at all, who was widowed. My sister, and my 2 sisters from their different age and different experiences and reasons for dating, right? We would write this book about dating in the modern age, right? And using the apps and all of those things. So we set off on this dating experiment in which I said, no one will ever meet anyone else. I will never get serious. Nothing will ever happen. And at the end of about 4 months of that, I realized that it wasn't for me at this moment, that it had become sort of an unhealthy habit. And I was not being who I wanted to be in dating. And so decided to put the brakes on that. And I went on one last date because I'm terrible at saying no, and I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings and whatever. And so I showed up to a Starbucks thinking this was 15 minutes. And 4 hours later, I was still talking to this amazing man and just having this easy conversation. And a couple months later, he had not held my hand, he had not tried to kiss me, but we were spending all of our time together, and we were talking all the time, and we were on a hike, and little Emmy was 15 months old, and she was on his back, and we were on a hike, and he said, "I think that we'll be in each other's lives forever, and if that's just friends, I'm okay with that." And at that moment, what hit me was, I don't want to be your friend. And I started crying. And I said, I understand if you're not attracted to me, but I'm falling in love with you. And I don't think I can be your friend. And he said, that's not it at all. And he gave me a kiss. And he said, it's not that I'm not attracted to you. I'm just trying to be respectful. And I know you just came out of a 25-year, marriage in a pretty traumatic way. And so what happened is a year later, we got married, and Darren has 4 grown children of his own, and he has adopted Emmy, who is now 10. And so between us, we have 6 grown children who are now 24 through 36. My boys that I talked about earlier, they are now 28 and 31, and Emmy's 10. And she's this sort of only child with all these siblings, and we lived a really amazing, charmed life and have a very empowering partnership. And so that's where I will leave you for today, is that, my life has come full circle, and I have these businesses that provide well. And now my husband has started his own business 3 years ago, and that is amazing. And I get to walk alongside him and help him through things that I experienced. And my boys are doing well, and my daughter is just beautiful and amazing, and she doesn't have to save the world. She figured out she was not here to cure cancer. Maybe she will, she's that cool. But what she was here to do was save me, and needing to take care of her, and her needing me for my survival was my life raft during a difficult, that was hard for me to say, difficult time of grieving. And so she is a beautiful part of my life, and I want to share all of the tools in coming episodes. I share some tools about taking responsibility and locus and control of your life, grabbing an oar of ownership, accountability, and responsibility versus being in bed with blame, excuses, and denial. I talk a lot about limiting beliefs. I share some tips and tricks about relationships, about a lot of entrepreneurial tricks. And I hope to share all of those with you on further episodes. So take good care. Be well.